The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. So get ready to talk, email, or post a message to us. We are looking forward to speaking with you and responding to your questions. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you here again today. I'm going to talk to you today about lying, the pain, the power, and the purpose of lies. And lies are very complicated, and every single one of us knows what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a lie, at least at one point in our life. But the reality is that we're also inclined to lie because there are layers and layers of reasons why we do so. Now, we got to understand that there are lies between individuals, you and your spouse or your friend, somebody you're close to, somebody you work with. It could go out to, somebody who is selling you something, and maybe something to do with political lies that we might be hearing about. So, the reasons that people may lie may have something to do with self-gain. They may have something to do with protecting you, but lies are complicated, and they can be about many different things and for many different reasons. So let's understand that there's no one single lie, and that it's important to understand kind of what's driving this lie in order to really be able to respond to it, and to also understand that, we can't just point our fingers at other people and say, you're a liar or you lie about things, because if we really, really reflect, we will recognize that we are kind of all woven a little bit to lie to a lesser or much, much, much greater degree. And, some people actually use lies in a very compulsive way. They almost feel uncomfortable not lying, whereas other people feel uncomfortable lying. So, one of the questions I want to ask you is, are you uncomfortable lying or not lying? And, just kind of let it simmer inside. You might realize that there are moments when you feel really uncomfortable telling the truth. You might be in a situation where there's a kind of an attitude of shaming, an environment of blaming. And if you admit to, scratching the car or something like that, or, not finishing an assignment in the time that it needs to be done, you may be inclined to, bend the truth a bit. But if you are in an environment where there's a real encouragement to tell the truth and to explore, how you arrived at a certain place, or, what's happening with you, and people are very receptive and warm, you may actually feel a little bit more inclined to tell the truth just because you don't have to kind of catalog and remember all the things you're lying about because the people around you are accepting. So there are reasons that we lie, and there are reasons that we learn to lie. And for some of us, we've learned to lie because it seems safer, less dangerous to lie. Or we've learned that we can gain tremendously in terms of our sense of power when we lie. So it's a complicated thing. However, let's understand that sometimes truth hurts. And it can be true that the most painful thing that we could do is tell somebody the truth. And surprisingly, even though, you hear people saying that they don't like it when people lie or they're not truthful, they're deceitful, the reality of it is that, like, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody and you really love that person and, you're inclined to, I don't know, lie, even though you love that person. Why would you want to do that? Well, think about it. Do you really want to hear your romantic partner tell you maybe you're not as attractive as you were 10 years ago, or that they might think about something else or even someone else during an intimate moment, or have some moments of doubt where they wonder, why this relationship isn't working so well, or that they're feeling, very close to somebody at work. There are reasons that, let's say, really close people lie to each other. I mean, certainly if somebody's bought a dress for a special event and says, hey, I'm going to be wearing this dress to this, whatever the event is, not now during COVID, but at some point, and you look at them and you can see that they really love the dress and it looks good. It might not look fantastic, but are you going to really say, I think you can do better? Or are you going to just, appreciate what they appreciate? Like, this is a question I have for you. Like, what do you think? How would you handle something like that? Do you think that the lie in that moment is really actually worth telling? Or do you want to, just say it the way it is? Oh, I really hate that dress on you. Here's a question from Laura, and she is asking if there's a way to listen to the broadcast yes, we always post the broadcast on traumapractice.org /blog-radio-show. So if you go to the traumapractice.org website, you can see that there's a resources link, and then you just scroll down to the blog and radio show, and that's always going to be where they are. So if you go to that page even now, you'll see that many of the previous radio show blogs and details are on that page, including many links that we discussed during the radio show. So if there's something that I'm talking about, you think it's going to be like a really useful thing for you to pick up, that you can always pick it up there. And of course, if you want to, and you're feeling generous, you can support the traumapractice.org. We're actually just in the process of running a whole bunch of online programs during this COVID-19 situation, so that people in the community can have access to group-based programs, so that they have an opportunity to get some support and learn some ways of working with stress or anxiety, or just the situation at hand, dealing with being isolated, right? So we want to always encourage people to remember that isolation can be a really difficult thing to focus on. So if you want to talk about this situation about lying, email us at instudio101@gmail.com, and we'd be glad to hear from you and talk about the situation. So let's look a little bit more closely about this whole thing around lying and why we need to keep it in our minds. So just know that there are 7 types of lies, according to one writer, Eva Riker Smith, And Eva says that we all exhibit unique idiosyncrasies when we lie, and that we can look at a series of types of lies. So there's an error, just lying by mistake. The person believes that they're being truthful, but what they're saying is actually not true. By omission. So we've left out very important information or information that people might want to know, like, why is there a scratch on the car? Oh, I just didn't bother mentioning it. Easier, and it's the least risky. It doesn't involve inventing any stories. It's just like you're leaving it out. It's a passive deception, and there's less guilt that's involved for the person. Well, I'm not so sure about that. The next one is restructuring, which is when you actually distort the context. So you'll say something maybe sarcastically. You might change the characters or alter the scene. So, depending on the context, is that a lie? So sometimes when I'm giving examples of events that have occurred, either when I'm training students, or even sometimes in this forum on the radio show, I'll change details because I don't want to reveal anything that would suggest a particular client or a particular setting in which I have shared a personal conversation with someone. So, I might restructure the context. Denial, refusing to acknowledge a truth. The extent of denial can be quite large. It might be lying only to you just this one time, or they might be lying to themselves. And sometimes we'll do that actually, and there are benefits to lying to oneself. And I'll talk to you about that in a little while as well. So keep in mind that, we may look at lies as being problematic and troublesome, but there are known benefits. Minimization is reducing the effects of a mistake, a fault, or a judgment call. So we don't want it to seem as terrible as it was. So we're going to underplay that, that thing that happened, or maybe even exaggeration. So we'll make it look so much better. Maybe make something that was like, it was fine, or maybe it wasn't even very good at all, but we're going to make it into some great, wonderful, successful, magical moment. And sometimes actually making something that was just okay into something that was really pleasant in our minds can be, a way of actually helping bolster our sense of well-being. So again, we may use these kinds of fabrications to help ourselves, and they can help. And finally, fabrication, just completely and intentionally inventing a story that never happened. So just understanding that all of these things can occur. And it's just very interesting that if you just reflect for a little while, you may realize that in the course of your lifetime, you may have used all or some of these strategies. And, as I said before, there are reasons that we want to recognize that, lying can actually feel like it's the right thing to do, and that even though we don't intentionally want to mislead people, we may find ourselves doing it very quickly. So in lying, there's this pre-lying contemplation phase where you're just thinking about the lie and trying to think about, how this might impact your social relationships or your work relationships. And, you start to contemplate how you're going to present this, whatever the lie is. Sometimes lies happen pretty quickly and there isn't a lot of time. You might recognize some of these things as well. So you may be driven to lie because it's beneficial, but you might not want to lie because of very clear potential penalties or negative consequences. And these ones are, being seen as being untruthful. Like there's now a moral element to it where we, either somebody may recognize that we're not truthful, or we may feel very bad about not telling the truth. We might feel that we're letting the people in our lives down. There's also a negative consequence if you're the liar and you've lied to somebody who you really want them to trust you, and now they've figured out that you've been lying. Maybe there was a deception, maybe there was some romantic cheating, and rebuilding a relationship after, let's say, cheating can be very difficult, and it doesn't always work. So, we may destabilize a very important relationship through lies, and that may have a very devastating effect. So there's also the potential distress of being lied to, just the feeling of hurt, what it's like when somebody you really care for, or, even if you don't care for the person, just somebody in your network, somebody you bought something from, somebody who, you're counting on to purchase something, let's say from your company, and you're counting on it, or, a friend who's told you they're going to show up for something and you really need to know and want to know that they're going to be there. And you find out that they were not telling the truth, and just the feelings of betrayal that go along with that. And that can feel, actually, even for the person who's so-called lying, when they really realize how badly they've hurt somebody, that can be a burden as well. And, there can be a lot of kind of internal feelings, things like shock and disbelief. That's a really strong emotional reaction. There could be like a cognitive behavioral reaction. And this is like things like withdrawing or distancing from the person that has lied to you. For the liar, this can be shocking and surprising, because sometimes liars don't really make the connection that we can really completely and absolutely lose the relationships that we have. And that can be really distressing. And that there could be a thirst for revenge. So if you've lied to somebody, they may actually arrive at a position where they feel justified to hurt you back in some way. And, what would happen in that case? It could lead to arguments and fighting. You can actually experience, a complete social ostracism. So if you're the liar, sometimes people who lie can be removed from the status that they have. There's lots of cases of people who had great positions of power, or maybe they were well-known athletes, and maybe they lied about using a performance-enhancing drug, and obviously there are cases like this, and now they have lost all their status in the field for all of the achievements that they had previously gained, and that can be very disturbing. So just keeping in mind how many ways, we can lose when there is lying. The other thing is, sometimes people lie and then they really regret it, and they kind of carry this feeling of humiliation, feeling mad about themselves, and really, carry with them a sense of regret, and also just a kind of turning point of a crisis where, all of a sudden you realize that there's no going back after this lie is actually factually clarified, and that can be very, very distressing and lead people to be very confused about the outcome. So let's take a couple of questions. This is from Lori. Hi, Lori. So Lori says she's 73 years old and has suffered from complex PTSD with limbic ADHD. My original trauma was at age 7 when my mother told me to pick between her and my father because she was leaving. Now that is really tough. Um, Lori says she was frozen in fear. She never left and nothing was ever said afterwards. Afterward, I had a lifetime of emotional abuse from most relationships, but I suppressed the hurt and anger. 7 years ago, all the memories exploded when I had 5 huge losses. I had no support or anyone trying to understand my grief. I have been avoided, lied about, abandoned, called mentally ill, and had grandchildren being turned against me. My daughter was covering up her infidelity, so turned all blame on me and her ex. My family believed her to this day. I have worn out a few friends from phone calls crying. Wow. Well, thank you for letting us know what's going on with you, Lori. This is a lot of loss and pain and suffering. And when you have a history like this, I always think that one of the most important things that we can do is learn how to have compassion for ourselves. So it's almost like if you're going to lean towards all of those stories of pain, loss, and suffering, then it's also time to lean towards an absolute willingness to love and care for yourself. Because it seems that in your lifetime, you have not received a whole lot of ease and comfort. So I want to challenge you, Lori, to wake up every day and ask yourself, what 5 things can you do for yourself that would just really actually reinforce your sense of love for yourself? Is it going out for a walk, taking in the sun, reading an excellent or interesting book, learning how to meditate? What can you do for yourself today? What happens in the moment when your heart aches and you feel the pain of what you've lost? Can you then lean towards that and say, I accept myself, I love myself? It's one thing to live in a world where you've had people who themselves are injured and, move towards lies or deceit. Everybody has their own reasons for doing it. But in the end, where is love for yourself going to come from? And I would really, really encourage you to focus on that, because, the one thing is really true is that, unless people are really ready to take on their own lives or their own behaviors, turning to them for their apology or for them to fix the situation just usually leads to more pain. So please work on loving yourself, because that is, at this point, really what it's about. So let us spend a little bit of time talking a little more about what other kinds of lies there can be. And I think it's really not unusual for people to, kind of fib a little bit. So I was reading this article that was in the American Psychological Association Monitor, and it's all about lies. And while one would think that the therapy room or the relationship between client and therapist would be a place where people can just say what they feel, the truth is that a large number of people in therapy are actually lying to their therapist. Not all the time, but, that lying does occur. And, even though clients may actually feel very safe with their therapist, and if you don't feel safe with your therapist, look, tell your therapist you don't feel safe, because, that's a kind of important thing, and it can be very therapeutically helpful and healthy to tell your therapist, that you don't feel safe and why. And that can actually be used as a kind of a ground for working on the therapeutic relationship, which will help you in all relationships if it's done well. Okay, so let's go back to clients not telling the truth. with their therapist. And why would that be? So there was a study done, Farber's study. In Farber's study, he was the one who did the study in 2016, and 73% of those responding said the truth about their lies has never been acknowledged in therapy, and only 3.5% owned up to lies voluntarily. And in another 9% of cases, the therapist uncovered the truth. And just, what does this mean in terms of doing therapy? Does it mean that you have to tell the truth all the time? Why would people not tell the truth? So there's lots of reasons that people don't tell the truth. And I think most of them fit kind of fully in the place of feeling shame. So just this idea that, it's hard to disclose that maybe, you're feeling, more suicidal or more hopeless or more depressed than you had hoped to. And in some cases, the clients actually want to protect the therapist by not being seen as a complainer or not wanting to upset the therapist. So they move into like a minimization, like pretending they're happier or healthier than they actually feel. Or they might not want to disclose that their drug use has gotten worse because they're struggling. And so, they'll not want to, say, let's say they don't want to disclose that they're smoking a lot of marijuana and, feeling kind of not so good about it. Maybe they don't feel good about it themselves, and they're feeling like, well, if I tell the therapist will have as negative a feeling about me as I have about myself. Because often, this is what happens, is we already feel unhappy and ashamed about, our own behaviors at times, because, we're so far from perfect that it's unbelievable. And so, we want to make sure that, people around us don't look at us as if we are as bad as we think ourselves to be. And often, when you're working with a therapist, the idea of offering, these little disclosures is an opportunity for you to really kind of potentially look at yourself in a new way, in a way that gives you a chance to, feel like you can share the burden of that. And that might be really, it might be really helpful. Okay, so let's look at another email. This one is from Mick. Hi, Mick. And Mick says, hi, doctor. What about the little white lie? Perfect example as to what you said. I would never want to hurt my spouse's feelings. So if she asked me, for example, about her weight, I lie to her. Yeah, see, that's the thing. That's what I was saying, that, we often do these things. And in fact, there are all these benefits from these little white lies that, in fact, we don't want to admit it on some level that, telling somebody that they look attractive when in fact you feel like, maybe they can lose weight, like you were saying, Mick, what are we going to do with that? I mean, it just seems pretty clear that there are reasons that we lean towards lying in those moments. And much of it comes from this place of not wanting to damage the relationships that we have. So I would really kind of ask you to think about, lying in a kind of with the perspective of, it is sometimes very difficult to tell the truth. And there are times when the truth is the right thing. Certainly if somebody's health or well-being is involved, we want to tell the truth. If it's a deception where you're taking advantage of somebody, you need to step back and ask yourself what's really going on with you. And is this really the way you want to conduct yourself in life? I really believe that, we have a responsibility to act in an ethical and moral way. So the little white lie that you're telling your wife about her weight, that she looks great, on some level, I have no doubt that she must look great. And whatever pounds she has on her, when we look at somebody we love, we're seeing love, or at least that's what we should be seeing. And if we're not, then we need to try to find that inside of ourselves. Okay, let's look a little bit at this whole thing of why lying is actually good for you, and that a little lie, like your little white lie, the little fib, why the research is showing us that in fact it can be good. Okay, so apparently lying can make you more productive, and the research is showing that a few white lies around the office, for example, may even boost your productivity. If, for example, you have a boss who's extremely demanding and you're working on a project with that person's very exacting schedule, you may find that their version of a timeline may not exactly work in terms of how you're structuring the project. So you may say that you are actually moving forward on the timeline, but it might not be quite according to the outline that this very overbearing boss is putting you through. Lying, now this is another one based on the research, can make you a better friend, and that is including lies of omission. So, this is going back to Mick's comment, the idea that, let's say you've got a friend who has been on a diet for a year and you don't really notice too much about the results, but they're asking, how they're looking. And, are you going to say, well, you look great, and you're wonderful? Or are you going to say, well, you know what? It just seems to me that you haven't lost any weight. So that is the lie of omission. So, you can tell your friend that they look great. You don't have to say to them, you cannot notice that they've lost any weight. Lying can boost your mood. So this is actually a kind of an internal version of the universe where, research is suggesting that depressed people may be more realistic than their non-depressed counterparts because of their overly realistic worldview. So what that really means is that if I'm a super realistic person, so-called, and all I can look at is, okay, here we are in a COVID-19 lockdown, and that means that I can't do many of the normal things that I would do. And I may get very, very focused on that. And that may be true, that, I cannot go out for dinner with my friends, and I can't go to the local coffee shop, and I can't, go to certain places that I would normally go to, or have dinner parties, or enjoy, visiting with some, clients directly face to face. Yes, all those things are true, but now I have a choice. I can lie to myself and say, I'm really happy with the things as they are. I might not go that far. I'm not happy with things the way they are. I feel sad about, what's going on with COVID and the losses, but I am probably disinclined to kind of ruminate too much about the things that I cannot do, and I'm probably inclined to focus instead on the things that I'm now able to do that I wouldn't have had time for before, like, doing some projects at home and things like that. So, I mean, that's a kind of a way of boosting your mood by focusing on the positive. Lying can improve your relationship. Mick has given us an idea of how that might work by not telling your spouse that they should be losing weight. Lying might be able to keep you on track toward your own goals. So, for example, you might be feeling defeated when you're working towards a goal, but you're actually falling short. And you may say to yourself that going to the gym for 10 minutes was a great start, even though the real goal was half an hour, 3 times a week, or, exercising by YouTube video, as many people are doing now, and doing a 15-minute YouTube video exercise rather than the 31 that you said. And you're saying to yourself, wow, that's so great. I did it. Okay. So that's fine. Now you're moving toward your goal. And again, you're lying, right? But it's it's going to work out better because you're now boosting your sense of self-esteem and you're giving yourself some props for actually accomplishing something. Um, this can really go on and on. It's like all the little ways in which we can tell ourselves little things that actually boost us and make us feel stronger and better. So it's just a very interesting thing to keep that in mind, that these little lies can actually make us feel better. This is from Eleni, and she says, fantastic topic. How do we encourage our partner to overcome a lie we told when they feel betrayed? Oh, I love that question, Eleni. That is so, so great. Okay. Now, obviously, I don't know what the lie is, Eleni, and it sounds like whatever the lie was, in whatever context it was, it kind of relies a leaning towards. So what does it mean when somebody we really care about, let's say, feels betrayed? And, when we really think about the kind of impact it has had on them, are we actually willing to hear what they have to say and understand the impact? That's a great start, because what happens when we really own it and we can really reflect to that person how bad that felt for them, we can learn and grow together. So, one of the nicest things that can happen, in a relationship when we've been together for a while, is we have these little opportunities where, our lack of perfection, and really there's just nobody who is perfect in marriage. I'm married to a very sweet guy. We do not have a perfect relationship. We have a lovely relationship. We share a lot of great things together, and sometimes things are not perfect. But that's how it is. And sometimes, in relationship, we have to recognize that we can work through and make a commitment to finding strategies to work through difficulties in our relationship. So there has to be a willingness. And, I would really encourage that. Primarily, ask your partner, can we talk about it? Ask your partner what it was about that thing, the betrayal that happened, that was hurtful to that person. And then tell them what you think you heard, so they know that you get it and why it's important to them. And tell them what is it you're committed to do going forward. That would be a really good start to figuring out, how are you going to deal with this? Because we want to know that we can trust the people that are closest to us. And if things don't go up as well as we had hoped to, we have to know that we can commit to working it through, because we are not perfect people. We're just never going to be perfect. And this one is from Ali. Hi, Ali. I hope your colleagues at the radio show and listeners are keeping safe and healthy. Thank you so much. I have 2 questions about lying, and I'll appreciate if you can talk about them. Is lying adaptive? I have totally covered that. It definitely is adaptive. There's so many ways in which we use lying to protect ourselves, to make people like us, to keep our power, to keep a sense of, if we've done something wrong, we might not want other people to know. And this is a really good story. So people have heard of Coco the gorilla. Coco the gorilla is really famous. So Coco the gorilla had a cat, and the kitten was, like just a tiny little kitten. And, Coco one day just had, I don't know, the impulse to rip his sink out of the wall. And, well, the way the story goes is because Coco knew sign language, Coco was able to tell the handlers, when asked who pulled the sink out of the wall, Coco blamed his kitten. Can you believe this? It's hilarious. Now, why would this gorilla Coco tell his handlers that All Ball, the name of the kitten, was responsible for the sink being pulled out of the wall? Well, it's quite clear that Coco didn't want to disappoint his handlers and was prepared to point the finger at All Ball, or maybe Coco thought there were going to be repercussions. The idea is that, like, lying is it's pretty hard woven into who we are. So keep that in mind. Like, there's even stories of dogs lying. You catch your dog just after the dog has, like, ripped up the garbage or something, and you say, "Did you do that, Jasper? Did you rip up the garbage?" And Jasper will be like, like, head down, pretending that nothing happened there at all, that doesn't know anything about it. But yeah, so I mean, deception is kind of universal, much to our hope that we could be above deception. We're really not. We use it in so many different ways. So let's read another one. This is from Paul. Paul says, fantastic topic today. My pet peeve is with people who lie about communicating. Okay, let's hear that. When I send a text message or an email to someone at work and I'm waiting on an answer from that person, I absolutely hate when they say they got back to me when they did not. It is always an excuse about technology. For instance, they would say, "Oh, I never got your email." Then our IT department checks on things and reports all is well. The person lied. Oh, yes, Paul. This is one of those. Usually when we lie about certain things like that, we've learned that we can get away with it. But sometimes, and this is really important to know, sometimes we just have to know who we're dealing with. So if you're dealing with somebody, Paul, who has this tendency of, lying in that particular way, know them for who they are. Just recognize that these are not the people you will count on for a quick or even honest response. And maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're overworked, maybe they forget things, maybe they just simply don't check. I don't know what the reason is, and there could be many reasons, but just see that person as accurately as you possibly can so that you can lower the burden on yourself, because that's really what, often communication requires us to, and even maintaining relationships requires us to be easier on ourselves. Like, don't burn any of your own internal resources over frustration with another person's struggle to be honest, because it's just not worth it in many cases. What I want to talk about as well is something really, really interesting that we see in the news. And what we see in the news is a large amount of potentially false claims. I mean, I've been watching what has been going on in terms of something called perception management as well as fire hosing. So keep in mind those two things. They're really interesting concepts, and they're used more in a political or a business context than anywhere else, because this would be hard to achieve on a one-to-one or a personal level. So a perception management, it's considered a size op method for deception and disinformation, and it's a kind of propaganda technique that is used. It was actually it originated, the term perception management originated within the U.S. military, and the idea is that it's a way of kind of communicating to lead people to certain conclusions. And an example of perception management was the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And they used a perception management technique to incorrectly disseminate the ideas that Iraq was using weapons of mass destruction. And this was not actually the case. In the end, it was a way of getting Americans to believe that the Americans should go to war with Iraq. And in the end, their weapons of mass destruction, in the way that they were portrayed to the American people, were not found, even though, at one point, up to 22% believed that this was what was going on before the 2003 invasion. So there were really strange things going on, and that's complicated. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. The other thing that I've been following is what's happening in the U.S. with the current President Trump and the Washington Post fact checking. So the Washington Post has been checking the false or misleading claims of President Trump. And as of their most recent update, which was April the 3rd, 2020, with the president in office for 1,170 days, there are 18,000 false or misleading claims as of that date. That's a pretty shocking number. So, if you want to consider what might be going on with that, I want you to think about something called fire hosing. Now, fire hosing is a kind of lying that is very, very high volume and multi-channel. So what happens is, and first of all, it doesn't even matter if the lies are perceived as believable or not. That is irrelevant. What's relevant is high volume and multi-channel. It's rapid, continuous, and repetitive. It lacks commitment to objective reality, and it lacks commitment to consistency. It does not matter. It can change. It can change in the content, but and this idea of fire hosing, it actually came from a report, the RAND report, actually, and it was looking at Russia's approach to propaganda. And people have now said that they believe that Trump is using this fire hosing methodology of high volume and multi-channel content, so that the idea is, all other things being equal, messages received in greater volume and from more sources will be perceived as more persuasive. And it does not matter that, when fact checking is done, that it is not true in the end. The other thing is that first impressions are very resilient. So, we keep if we've been exposed to something and we keep getting bombarded by that same content, even if we've had an opportunity to really contemplate, is that true? Or look at other sources, we may still believe the first impression, or we may only believe certain people, even if, we have now come to notice that sometimes you hear that person say one thing and then they change their content. So, it's just really important to recognize that, these strategies are now being used on a political level that has been unprecedented as a result of the social media that we have access to. So it's really important to kind of think about this. Okay, this is from Jan, and Jan says, I was married to somebody with a PhD, and he became cruel, denying, and minimizing, blaming me no matter what action I took or what expression was on my face. His lying was so extensive that in an abuse assessment by psychologists, he fabricated stories to fill a 40-page typed assessment, and the assessor decided I had an anxiety disorder despite testing results, and said I needed to stop thwarting the access of a good father to his children. They almost recommended that custody be awarded to him. None of the friends and family I had with him speak to me now, and my daughter was recently told by his family that I could have been charged with kidnapping her when I separated from him, moving to a different province. His lies are so pervasive that there is nothing I can say to break them, through them, to repair any past relationships. A psychologist I saw thought he might have a personality disorder. I feel traumatized by our experiences. I have no way to repair any past relationships. That is very upsetting. And I'm really sorry to hear that, Jen. It sounds like you really were married to somebody who was very, very willing to say, again, whatever it took to, gain as much power as possible. Now, of course, I can't diagnose whatever this person may have had going for him, but it sounds like having some distance from this person, you now have an opportunity to really contemplate who you bring into your life and really start to think about what was the draw initially to this man. Because usually, when you find yourself in a relationship with a person like this, these qualities, they're characterological. They don't just show up after you've married. There are certain signs that you can see. So I'm going to really, really encourage you in every way possible to ask yourself, how would you like your life to look now? And start slowly to build towards bringing people in who are trustworthy, who you can love, who have an open heart and are capable of loving you too, because this is what you need to be focused on at this point. This is from Shaw. This topic is so hit home. Is there ever a proper time to lie to a child? For instance, telling them about Santa Claus when they are very young. Well, that's a good question, Shaw. I mean, lies are a funny thing, and I guess the question is, what do you value in your home? Do you want to show your child that, sometimes it makes sense to talk about difficult things? What happens when, you make a decision that you're going to, that's the white lie thing, Santa Claus. Like, I've talked a lot already about the many ways in which we lie that actually help us or help us feel better. But obviously there are consequences to these lies, including feelings of betrayal. So, this is a question for you rather, because this is your home and you get to make decisions there. What does it mean to you? What kinds of lies do you feel are reasonable that you can tolerate? Is it a lie to tell a child that, there's a Santa Claus, and what does that actually mean? Is it a storytelling thing, that you're giving them some hope and, helping them see magic? Or is it truly a lie to be concerned about? And this is from Ray. Excellent show today. It seems that in today's world, and not about COVID-19, that lies are more prominent than ever before. That seems to be the norm with people who believe in entitlement and are very self-centered. They only care about themselves and would lie to people to always benefit themselves. I actually really agree with this, Ray, because I think there's something very powerfully connected with lying and power. That, one of the really difficult things I find, when, trying to act in a moral and ethical way is that sometimes it means that things are not going to go my way. Like, I'm not going to, benefit myself always when I, let's say, support. Many years ago, I had a great office admin, and, she said, she wanted to try out something new, and she was ready for this really exciting job had come up overseas, and she asked me about it, and really I didn't want her to go. But the reality was that I knew that if I didn't encourage her to go and try out and give her a proper recommendation to the job, which she deserved, that I would hold her back. So it didn't benefit me in any way to tell the truth and to give her the good referral that she got from me to this company. But, you know, in my heart, it was the right thing to do. And no, it didn't make life easier for me because I had to replace her, but it was the right thing to do. And so I kind of wanted to encourage her and see her thriving in her life, because that's really, you know, that's really what feels right to me. So lying doesn't always lead to the best outcome. Telling the truth doesn't always lead to the best outcome for the person telling the truth. But we have to figure out, how do we want to live our lives? You know, do we want to live our lives with hardship and deception and, you know, misinformation? You want to kind of keep that moving forward. And, you know, why are we so afraid? You know, what are we really going to lose? Because I really believe, you know, that there's something powerful about staying in a place of truth in our life. So, and I'm talking about stories that could potentially harm if we are not honest. This one is from Karen, and she says, thanks for doing the show. My question is about the intentional lie, as it doesn't seem to fit into any of the 7 types of lies you mentioned earlier, saying you'll do something when in fact there is absolutely no intention to do it. Well, I think that is actually very interesting, Karen, because I think that sometimes people absolutely intentionally lie because they are uncomfortable saying no. And let's say, for example, you're in a relationship with somebody and they really do not want to go, let's say to a certain show, or they don't want to buy a certain thing, and you know, they feel pressured, and maybe they love the person that wants them to do this thing, and so they say yes when they mean no. And you know, that's about communication. That's about finding ways to be okay. It's kind of like the story that I've said before. You know, I had this great employee, and she told me the truth. She told me that she really wanted to apply for this job that she was excited about. I didn't want her to go, but I really wanted to encourage her to do what she needed to do to grow in her life. And I could have lied. I could have said to her, oh yeah, I'm going to give you a great reference. They're going to love you. And then not give her the reference at all. Just tell them, oh, she's terrible. And then she wouldn't have gotten the job and gone on to really have this exceptional experience in her life, which, you know, she was grateful for. So, you know, I would have been motivated by my own kind of, you know, make it comfortable for me motivation. So sometimes we'll just lie because we're uncomfortable being confronted with something. So, you know, just for a moment, if this is your relationship, ask yourself, is there a meaning or a purpose? Am I willing to hear no from the person that I'm talking with? Are they lying to me to protect me? You know, there are lots of reasons why people go down this road. And sometimes it really requires that we have the courage to hear the truth from the people around us. Okay, we are going to stop in just a moment. It has been an absolute joy hearing from all of you. As usual, there were quite a few emails today, so I'm sorry if I didn't get to your email. I love to get to all of them. But if I didn't get to yours, please stay tuned. We'll have another time together. Be safe, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.